You super day fashion slay.
You do not need to do anything to be trans or non-binary.
Also, kink is not inherently sexual.
But this story is about a non-binary gerbil who wants to be a rhythmic gymnast.
Hey everybody, I'm Brad Polumbo, and welcome back to Damage Control, my podcast where I'm reclaiming the LGBT community from the insane extremists on either side who've taken over the debate on these issues. Today, we're talking about a UFC fighter's viral rant and whether it was based or homophobic. Plus, a Christian group tries to cancel a company over a commercial, and, as always, I round out the show by reacting to some insane TikToks from the left-wing alphabet community. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We just crossed 100,000 on YouTube, and it's so great to have you all here with me. And if you're listening, make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you tune in on, and do consider liking and commenting on the video as we go along. But now, let's get into it. So I'm a little bit late to this story because I wanted to wait and cover it on Damage Control with my audience that's uniquely interested in these subjects, but we have to talk about what UFC fighter Sean Strickland just said this past week that went mega viral. He was at an event in Canada and a reporter, presumably a kind of woke reporter, asked him a series of questions about the LGBT community, and he did not take kindly to the line of questioning, I think it's fair to say. Take a listen, and apologies in advance to my producer, who's going to have to do a lot of bleeping here.
We've got a pretty supportive gay and lesbian community in this city. I did want to ask you about something you wrote a couple of years ago. You said, if I had a gay son, I would think I'd...
Oh, look, another. I'm saying the swamp, you guys, the swamp.
You become a champion, you become a star, and someone says...
Let me ask you something. Are you gay?
Have you had the chance to interact with a more diverse...
Are you... Let me know, are you gay?
Can I get an answer?
Well, no, I'm asking, this is a part of the... Are you a gay man?
I'm an ally of the community.
Okay. If you had a son and he was like, you had a son, he was gay, you'd be like, oh man, you don't want a grandkid?
No problem with it.
Oh man, well, dude, you're a weak fucking man, dude. You're part of the fucking problem. You elected Justin Trudeau. Like, when he sees the bank accounts, like, you're just fucking pathetic. And the fact that you have no fucking backbone, and has he shut down your fucking country and seized bank accounts? You ask me some stupid shit like that, go fuck yourself. Move the fuck on, man.
That doesn't really answer the question, but I did want to ask also things you said about the trans community. You said this past October when they announced the Bud Light sponsorship that you'd go so hard on Bud Light in your next fight, they'll have to accept me or denounce me when they know what, and will know what they stand for.
This guy's like, nah, this Canadian's not that Canadian.
Are you still going to use your fight time to kind of speak on that?
Here's the thing about Bud Light. 10 years ago, to be trans was a mental fucking illness. And now all of a sudden, people like you have fucking weaseled your way into the world. You are an infection. You are the definition of weakness. Everything that is wrong with the world is because of fucking you. And the best thing is the world's not buying it. The world's not buying your fucking bullshit you're fucking peddling. The world is not saying, you know what? You're right. Fucking chicks have dicks. The world's not saying that. The world's saying, no, there are two genders. I don't want my kids being taught about, who they could fucking school. I don't want my kids being taught about, their sexual preference. Like, dude, this guy's a fucking enemy. You want to look at the fucking enemy to our world? It's that motherfucker right there, asking these stupid fucking questions.
So a lot of people on the right online were basically heralding this guy as a based king who schooled a woke reporter. Here's what some of them had to say. So we had Jesse Kelly, who is a right-wing radio host. He said, "This is a how-to video for Republicans dealing with apparatchiks in the media. Stop trying to win them over. Stop with the qualifiers. Stop denouncing what they want you to denounce. Treat them like the pawn scum they are." Tim Pool, the massively popular YouTuber and podcast host, said, "Holy F, fire, fire, fire. This guy's A+ right here. Thanks, Bud Light, for bringing us this message on the infection that is the woke left." Matt Walsh, as you might expect, was a big fan of this, and the Daily Wire host tweeted, "Sean Strickland for White House Press Secretary 2024. I'm going to break with many people on the right who were kind of lapping up what this guy had to say, which is not exactly unusual for me, and say that, well, there were a few things in there I kind of agreed and appreciated with. I'm very much not a fan of Justin Trudeau, for example. I actually have some serious issues with the message that this UFC fighter conveyed in this viral clip. I will say, though, I think people on the right have a point when they complain about the reporter. Why are you bringing up LGBT politics at a UFC press conference? Like, come on, can't you just ask questions about the sport? I do agree that that is annoying and dumb, and I wouldn't blame Sean Strickland for wanting to shut it down, but I do have an issue with the way he chose to go about that. Honestly, what he had to say about fathers accepting their gay sons is really, it's gross, it's unkind, and yes, it's homophobic. It's also ignorant. For whatever reason, he suggests that gay people are incapable of having children, so you'll never have a grandson or a grandchild, but that's just not true. Gay people can and do have genetic offspring through surrogacy all the time, and while that's controversial, it's a fact that it happens. So it's not impossible to have a genetic grandchild just because your son is gay. You're also assuming you don't have any other children, and more importantly, gay couples can and do adopt. So unless he's suggesting that adopted kids aren't really part of the family, or that adoption's not a legitimate form of family formation, I don't see what he's going off about wanting a grandkid and not being able to have one if you accept a gay son. The other thing is, your son's gay whether you accept him or not. So your acceptance isn't going to change whether you get a grandchild out of it. It is what it is. It's your choice to be accepting and loving or to not. But either way, you're going to have a grandkid or you're not. And I really take issue with the assertion that accepting your gay son makes you a weak man, which while some people on the right try to say that's not really what he was saying, roll back the clip.
Hey.
Can I get an answer?
Well, no, I'm asking. This is a part of. Are you a gay man?
I'm an ally of the community.
Okay. If you had a son and he was like, you had a son, he was gay, you'd be like, oh man, you don't want a grandkid?
No problem with it.
Oh man, well, dude, you're a weak man, dude.
That's exactly what he said. On the contrary, I actually think it takes a strong man to put accepting and loving his child over his own genetic narcissism and toxic ideas about masculinity. So I actually did see why people were upset by his comments and found them kind of homophobic. Additionally, what he said about transgender people wasn't great. Yes, gender dysphoria is a mental illness. That's simply a fact. It's in the DSM. But he kind of spat that out like it was a vile, dirty word, when in reality, people with any form of illness, including mental illness, deserve our compassion and empathy. Just because someone has a mental condition doesn't make them an outcast or a freak or suggest that they're somehow beyond the pale in the way that everything about his tone seemed to suggest. We never apply that kind of thinking to people with anxiety issues, for example. And I don't see why gender dysphoria would be any different. I respect a wide variety of opinions about gender-related issues, but I think everybody should be kind and compassionate in the way they approach them. And that is not how he came off in that clip. Of course, unlike many of the left-wing critics, I don't want this guy canceled for what he said. I don't think it should have any bearing on his UFC professional career. But I do totally disagree with all the people on the right who are praising him as if he's some bold truth teller, rather than just another ignorant athlete popping off about politics in an uninformed and unintelligent way. Now, UFC president Dana White came out and responded to this. Let's take a listen to that clip.
About you obviously give a long leash to your fighters about, what they can say when they are up there with the UFC microphone and you are getting into territory of homophobia, transphobia. Is there...
I don't give anybody a leash.
Well, I'm saying you...
A leash?
Free
speech. Control what people say. Going to tell people what to believe. Going to tell people... I don't tell any other human being what to say, what to think, and there's no leashes on any of them. What is your question?
I was asking that question. I'll move on, though.
Yeah, probably a good idea. That's ridiculous to say I give somebody a leash. Free speech, brother. People can say whatever they want and they can believe whatever they want.
I'm totally fine with what Dana White had to say here, and I think if a company wants to have a free speech attitude towards its employees, that's great. And again, I don't think Sean Strickland should face professional consequences just for saying something I find ignorant or objectionable. But I do think the criticism and bad PR are fair game. Still, if UFC wants to allow this kind of free speech atmosphere, doesn't want to police what people say, that's all good with me. But that does have to go both ways. That means a UFC fighter is going to have to be allowed to trash America if they want to, mock Christians, or trash Israel, or do anything that might upset some of the same people who are heralding Strickland as this brave truth teller. The other thing is that I'm detecting some serious conservative hypocrisy here, because how many times have we heard from people on the right that they're sick of athletes taking woke political stands? Remember LeBron James and the whole shut up and dribble fiasco?
Oh, and LeBron and Kevin, you're great players, but no one voted for you. Millions elected Trump to be their coach. So keep the political commentary to yourself, or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
Now, I'm personally pretty sympathetic to the idea that athletes should stick to sports and avoid weighing into politics when they don't know much about it and it's only going to divide people. But what you can't do is complain about it when left-wing athletes speak their mind, yet celebrate it when conservative athletes do the same thing. Which is it? Shut up and dribble? Or yes, King, keep up the brave truth-telling? You can't have it both ways, at least not without being hypocritical. I'm just asking for some basic consistency, but of course, in 2024, on either side, that's a lot to ask. Do we want athletes fighting the culture war and making charged political statements? I'd really prefer that we just don't do that, don't go there. But if we're going to, that's fine. Let's just be consistent about it. Let me know what you think about this controversy in the comments section. I want to hear if you have a different opinion, let me know. I'm always open to pushback or criticism, but I'll leave it there for now. And I wanted to bring you guys a little bit of a different take on this story, because basically all I saw on the right was one-sided, uncritical, all 100% fanfare for this guy. And while I can appreciate him telling off a woke reporter and him trolling Justin Trudeau, I still don't like the actual substance of what he had to say about the LGBT community. Up next, a Christian group is trying to cancel a company over an offensive commercial they did featuring a gay couple. So the latest subversive left-wing company pushing the gay agenda on the youth is Turbotax? The company just released this ad, and I'm going to just roll it so you can see it for yourself. You're welcome, Turbotax, for the free PR. You can send checks to my P.O. box. But guys, just take a listen to it or review to it and let me know what you think.
When Doug and Andre came to TurboTax,
we navigated a turbulent housing market by
buying a boater home. But we didn't know the first thing about filing taxes as first-time home buyers.
I knew how to make their move count. We file taxes for millions of new homeowners and guarantee 100% accuracy on land and sea.
Was that a shark?
Yes.
Make your moves count. Intuit TurboTax. 100% accuracy guaranteed.
So this commercial struck me as extremely anodyne, and honestly, it's not even super clear that they're a gay couple, except for his arm being around the other guy in one of the scenes. But it's pretty low-key and honestly would probably go over the head of many very young viewers. But as far as the gay agenda goes, this isn't that. This is just an ad depicting gay people existing. And apparently that is still, even in 2024, upsetting to some people on the religious right. Not everybody. I know lots of y'all are much more open-minded and modern, but some people still aren't. So we've got reporting here from LGBTQ Nation about 1 million moms, the right-wing socially conservative group that has condemned TurboTax's commercial. 1 Million Moms claims that the ad tries to push the gay lifestyle and redefine family. It appears that TurboTax is promoting same-sex marriage to please a small portion of the population while pushing away the much larger percentage of potential conservative customers. Millions of Americans strongly believe marriage should be between one man and one woman, but TurboTax would rather take sides than remain neutral in the culture war. In an attempt to redefine family, Turbotax is using public airwaves to subject families to the decay of morals and values while belittling the sanctity of marriage. Even though homosexuality is unnatural, this advertisement is pushing the LGBTQ agenda. An even greater concern is that the controversial commercial is airing during prime time when children are likely watching television. It is not a company's job to introduce so-called social issues such as this to our children. Turbotax is glorifying sin, and no sin should be honored. Turbotax should never have crossed this line. They're not just complaining about the commercial, they've actually launched a petition and are hoping to boycott Turbotax because of this incredibly offensive commercial. This is right-wing snowflakery and conservative cancel culture, y'all. If you're really so upset about a mere depiction of a gay couple existing, that's a you problem, babe. You need to put on your safety helmet, get into your safe space, and make sure to cut yourself off from the offensive outside world where not everything is going to perfectly align with your personal beliefs and religion. The horror, right? You might actually see something that's different from what you personally believe. What a crazy thing to experience. Look, gay people exist, and society is under no obligation to pretend otherwise just to shield you from having to ever encounter something that depicts a reality you don't agree with in the real world. You're free to teach your kids whatever you want about homosexuality. You can teach them your religion, teach them it's a sin, whatever. But the world doesn't have to censor reality to shield them from things that contradict your family's personal beliefs. If we were going to play that game, lots of us could say that commercials should never feature a Christian family or a Muslim family or so on. That's just not how things work in a pluralistic and tolerant nation. And you do not need to worry about your kids seeing this and being exposed to the gay agenda and becoming gay. Like, babe, that's not how it works. Or trust me, I saw so many straight movies and straight commercials and all these things over the years, and it still did not make me straight. Obviously, there are times where I push back on a left-wing LGBT agenda being pushed and things, but this really isn't even one of them. Like, they're just showing gay people existing, and that's still triggering these Christian snowflakes. The real world isn't a safe space that has to always reflect your personal religious views. I really don't have anything to say to these right-wing cancel culture people other than grow up, cope, buckle up your helmet, because the real world is not your safe space. And guys, if you don't like woke cancel culture, if you don't like the kind of people calling for a boycott of UFC unless Sean Strickland is removed from the competition because of his offensive words, well, you shouldn't really be turning around and supporting right-wing cancel culture then either, should ya? Hey guys, Brad here, just reminding you to also check out my other podcast, the Based Politics Podcast, which I co-host with Hannah Cox.
This week, we're discussing Nikki Haley's recent racism debate that she sparked. We're also talking about Trump's promise to never create a centralized digital currency. And is Gen Z aging faster than everybody else? Yes.
Go to the link in the description to watch the episode on YouTube or check out the Base Politics Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, guys, up next, it's everybody's favorite part of the show because some of y'all are sadistic little guys out there. You like to watch me suffer. You get some sort of pleasure out of it. So this is, I hear from people all the time, everybody's favorite part of the podcast where I subject myself to torture and react to cringe left-wing LGBT TikToks. Up first, are they seriously still arguing that kink belongs at Pride?
The kink community belongs at Pride, full stop. They were an integral part of combating the AIDS crisis. Also, kink is not inherently sexual, and just existing as a kinky person in public does not mean that you are performing a scene. If you don't like how someone's dressed, look away.
I have a lot of problems with this, but I also just have confusion. Did this person really just say that kink isn't sexual? Then what is it, babe? My thing is that I really don't care what adults do in the privacy of their own bedrooms, so knock yourself out. But kink has nothing to do with being gay or being bisexual or lesbian or even being trans. straight people have kinks too. So don't conflate it with our immutable characteristics, your personal preferences and things that you're into. Like these are separate, just maybe don't conflate them. That please and thank you. Secondly, you got to choose one, either kink at Pride or kids at Pride. Because right now, people like this are trying to have both, and that is not okay, not appropriate, and giving the entire community a terrible look and a bad rap. Finally, if you're going out there in your kink and fetish gear at Pride, you're essentially subjecting the public, a bunch of people who didn't consent and aren't really interested in that, to being a part of that with you or to seeing you in your gear or whatever. It's like, and that's not really cool in my book. If you and your people who are into that want to go do that, knock yourself out. I really don't care. But I don't really think it's fair to force that onto other people who just want to go to a gay pride parade, that they have to be forced into observing or being around unrelated sexual fetishes. Like, can we just not? Can we not? Up next, try to keep up with this gender-confused TikToker.
Gender and presentation do not go hand in hand. Gender is a feeling you have inside, and how you present is an outward expression of your internal feeling of gender. You do not need to do anything to be trans or non-binary. You don't need surgery, you don't need hormones, you don't need to change your name. You can look the same way you do now, use the same pronouns you do now, and be trans or non-binary. You also don't need to disclose your gender to anyone. Discovering your gender is for you. Embrace the change and don't be afraid of it.
Y'all, can y'all keep up with this? Does this make any sense to you? Because I'm literally immersed in this stuff for my job, and it's not even mathing. The math is not mathing for me, babe. What's sad to me is that with this kind of woke word salad, they're actually undercutting the existence and validity of legitimate transsexual people who want to blend in. And guess what? Key to their idea of trans is the idea that you have to transition to be trans, because you're only trans if you have gender dysphoria, which means you experience a severe discomfort between your birth sex, your biological sex, and the sex that you would like to be perceived as, or to do the things associated with, or live as. That's what being trans means. If anybody who just feels like it with no criteria or action needed can be trans, then it's a meaningless category, one totally unworthy of legitimacy, respect, or protection. You sure you want to go down this path, babe? Because you're not doing your own cause much of a service with this kind of incoherent nonsense. Up next, here's a TikToker's guide to talking to pansexuals.
Things not to say to pansexuals. I'm watching you. So, basically you're just saying that you're bisexual? Does this mean you're attracted to pans? Are we still asking this in 2022? Do we still not know what pansexuality is? Come on.
All right, so I will admit that the second one is a cringe joke that was really never funny, but it certainly isn't funny now that we've heard it 10,000 times. So like, people should probably give that one a rest. But the first one is an entirely legitimate question to ask, because there is in fact no difference between pansexuals and bisexuals. Because sexual orientation is about biological sex, not gender identity. There are only two biological sexes. So if you're attracted to people in either of them, you are bisexual. I know they say pansexual means that you're attracted to people regardless of gender or regardless of sex. Well, there's only two sexes. So that's still the same thing as bisexual. I think, though, what the pansexual movement and label has emerged from is this desire to just, like, bisexual is so blasé. It's so like, oh, 1990s or 2000s or whatever. It's not really woke enough, or it doesn't get you enough oppression Olympics points on the oppressed scale. So they have to come up with some new thing to label themselves. It's just an outgrowth of the obsession with labels and the making of victimhood into a currency. Of course, when you do that, you're going to have people counterfeiting. I couldn't care less if somebody is bisexual, but don't just kind of gaslight us or insult our intelligence by insisting that being bisexual is actually called something totally different and unique that is just actually the same exact thing in practice. Maybe just don't do that. Okay? Up next, here's how this teacher teaches children about non-binary.
I think that teaching our children to have empathy and respect for others is the number one most important thing we can teach them. So let me show you one of my favorite books I use to teach inclusivity and empathy in my classroom. It's called Peanut Goes for the Gold, and Jonathan Van Ness is the author. They are one of my favorite human beings on the earth. You might know them from Queer Eye. But this story is about a non-binary gerbil who wants to be a rhythmic gymnast, and they do all the things, cartwheels, ribbon twirling, hula hooping, to meet their goal. And when they get to the gymnastics meet, they forgot to tie their shoes, and they trip and fall, but they ended up turning it into a magnificent move that wins them first place. But it's really just about how everybody has a different way of doing things, and that's okay. And we all just need to be true to our true selves. And it refers to Peanut as they or their in the story because they're non-binary. And when it comes down to it, if teaching children to be respectful of others' identities and calling them what they prefer to be called is the worst thing I do as an educator, then I'd say I'm doing pretty darn good.
I'm not so sure I would say that, girly. You should not be using the position of power and privilege and authority granted to you as a teacher who's entrusted with people's most precious thing in their life, their children, to push nonsensical left-wing gobbledygook on impressionable young minds. This is really bad. Non-binary isn't a coherent concept. It doesn't make sense even to rational adults who do their best to try to comprehend it. You are only going to confuse young children by putting this seed in their mind, and you're also kind of telling them something actually very regressive about gender and gender norms. Well, this gerbil is a non-binary, is a they-them, because the gerbil doesn't like things that are boys' things and girl things. Oh, what are these boy and girl things, you say? Well, the gerbil doesn't like dresses or makeup or sports or guns. So you're literally just pushing sex stereotypes and outdated gender roles and misogynistic concepts, basically, that girls have to be feminine and girly or else they're not a real girl. How many tomboys or effeminate little boys are you going to hopelessly confuse with this nonsense? Just let kids be kids, man. And when they get older, any of them have struggled with their gender identity organically, and they come and they want to be identified as non-binary or whatever, deal with it then. But don't start pushing nonsense on them when they're so young they're still reading picture books. Come on, this is crazy. And I really struggle to imagine a better way to piss off normal Americans than to push propaganda on their little children. You want to trigger a backlash to the LGBT community? Keep doing stuff like this, girly. Keep doing it. You're doing great if that is your ultimate goal. All right, finally, a video from my favorite TikToker, Jeffrey Marsh. Let's go.
Yoo-hoo! Super! They fashion slay! Bah, 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 bah. Pow! Jiggity, jiggity, jiggity. Have you been nice to a trans person today? Have you complimented someone, been sociable to an LGBTQ? So much of our existence and day-to-day experience can be about feeling isolated and like we're not included. And you can change that. You can be kind. People write me all the time, how should I treat trans people? Like everybody else. Be inclusive, be kind, be sociable, be nice. Thanks.
So the first part of this video just made me a little uncomfy, but you know what? It's cringe, but knock yourself out, I guess. Do whatever you want. I'm more interested in the latter part of this video where Jeffrey encourages people to be kind and sociable to trans people. Have you been nice to a trans person today? Well, babe, I'm not particularly nice or sociable to anyone except my dog. So the answer to your question is probably no. But I wanted to talk about this because I love the inherent contradiction between the things that Jeffrey and other activists like this person, what they'll all say. Go out of your way to be nice and kind and accommodating to trans people, but also just treat them like anyone else. Well, which one is it? I believe in the latter approach, right? Of just treating everybody the same and assimilating and all that. But they only want to believe in that when it's convenient, when it's time for affirmative action or identity politics or special shout outs and extra niceties, then identity is very important. But when it's time that they just want, in that instance, to be treated like everyone else, That's what they want. Well, Cupcake, you can't have the best of both worlds. Anyway, I can feel a headache coming on, and I don't have any Advil in the house, so I'm going to have to stop it there for the insane left-wing LGBT TikToks. If you got a kick out of this, if you found it interesting or insightful, and if you're here, you probably did, or at the very least, you just enjoy watching me suffer, drop a like and comment with your thoughts, and maybe consider subscribing on YouTube or following on Facebook, or if you're listening on audio podcasts, rating and reviewing. It would be a huge help. Now, I'll see you all next week on Damage Control. But if you're not sick of me yet and you want more of my content, you can go here or here to check out some of my other recent videos you might just enjoy.